Dr. Jazz.
Listen, yesterday while cooking to Mighty Lights, and I was again impressed. It's one of my favorite albums, and uh, and I just want to start with the latest one you also did, Picturing the Invisible, and I know Mark Elias, and you go, I think, a really long way back. I mean, Mark already, I played with Mark years ago, and I know you go back to Yale, I think, right? But what about Allison Miller? I know you did like a duo album also. Like, how did you, if you can just like, start the talk with this new one? I mean, what's the story behind it?
Yeah, the story was we're both faculty at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music, and I think it was the beginning of the pandemic. The school asked us to do a Zoom concert together, just like an improvised Zoom con. I mean, using Zoom, if you can imagine that, playing with each other on
Oh yeah,
Zoom.
it's terrible. Yeah,
But we somehow did it, and we actually really enjoyed playing with each other. Now she and I have known each other. We've played a little bit together, but that experience got us thinking, like, let's do more of this. So we started playing these remote duets with each other, but using different software, not Zoom. So that we had the latency, the delay went away.
oh wow, really? Okay.
But
Fantastic.
yeah, so that's how it happened. And at first, we never had an intention of making a recording. We just played. We just recorded, and we were just so desperate to play.
Yeah, sure.
Every Tuesday, we were free at this certain time, and then we just started playing. And then we would record it, and then like put the files together, and
Yeah,
that's how it came about.
mm. Yeah. I mean, she's amazing. She's really, I mean, also a fantastic band leader, Allison. So it's
Absolutely, absolutely.
it,
A great compositional, improvisational thinker. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And what about Miya Masaoka and
Miya, I've known. I've been playing with Miya with large ensemble and small ensemble
hmm,
concerts with um, a composer named Sarah Weaver. Are
okay.
you familiar with
No, don't
Sarah's
know,
work?
don't know.
It's called the Now Net Arts Ensemble.
Okay, to check it out.
But for many years, we've been playing in different contexts, where like ensembles of creative music improvisers, about anywhere from 10 to 12, 15,
Mm,
and a lot of times world music musicians involved as well. And that's where I met Miya.
mm.
And
And
we've been playing duets on
yeah,
and off occasionally. uh, God, over 6, 7 years. It's Yeah. So yes, it's a long time, collaboration.
yeah. And you and Mark basically go back to kind of late 70s already, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, I think I can remember meeting Mark like 1974 or something
Wow,
like that.
already. Wow.
And then, you know, we are in New Haven, Connecticut. That's where. So yeah.
And how did those duos that you guys did, like CRWay and Some Kind of Tomorrow? I know I love that stuff. I think it's on Mark's or on your Bandcamp, and Mark is such an amazing improviser. Also, anything you play, he just bounces off, and like you guys seem to have this natural chemistry. How did those duos happen?
Same thing as like with Allison.
Oh, okay.
It was during the pandemic. Mark and I were desperate to play. So we just started figuring out how to do it,
Mm.
using a software called Sonobus. Again, it makes the delay go away pretty much,
Like
or you
completely, or
perceive that it goes away.
oh, okay.
And No, not never completely,
Okay.
because there's something, I think that the musicians that we adapt in some
Yeah.
mystical way, some very mystical way. But Mark and I, we were so filled with the joy of just playing music together when we couldn't play, we couldn't, you know, and so we kept doing it, and
Yeah.
then we kept recording it. And again, same thing. We didn't have the intention of making albums. We just recorded what we were playing, and over time, we listened back and we said, "Wow, this is pretty interesting."
Yeah.
I don't think prior to releasing Some Kind of Tomorrow, I'd ever released an album of music completely improvised.
Impressed.
Completely.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, so look what the pandemic brought, the necessity of it just brought a new way of interacting. And Mark felt the same way too.
Mhm. What's your approach when completely improvising? I mean, just that you don't not repeat
Don't talk,
yourself or like, yeah,
don't talk, just play. Don't talk, just play.
yeah,
I have to tell you, we probably spent more time getting all the kinks out, when the internet connection isn't good or there's some kind of strange sound
yeah,
coming from the clock or the humidifier. We spent more time setting up sound. Well, but once we got it working, we just couldn't stop playing. It just
mm,
felt so good.
yeah. Did you do gigs also, like dual gigs with Mark or Allison afterwards, after the COVID, or not
No,
really?
I haven't
Oh,
been playing live in quite a while, and I look forward to that.
oh,
So, but no, this was all this remote relationship with musicians who I know pretty well, though.
yeah, yeah. I've done also like I think during COVID it was one of my most productive periods. I've done like 7 albums, like like you with people from Canada and from Israel, like just like okay, let's do this. Like it's a
Yeah,
bit bizarre.
because you could. Yeah,
Yeah,
because you could. Yeah.
yeah, and you had time, so there was like okay, it's bizarre, but
It kind of opened for me.
yeah.
It kind of opened a door. It definitely opened a door.
Oh yeah, yeah, me too. I mean, I realized you can actually do nowadays things that I would not think 10 years ago were possible. Or I would usually invite people to a studio, and make a tour and record and like the
Of course.
usual shizzle. But now it's just like okay, let's do it, and it works and it sounds great and yeah, amazing.
Well, as far as Mark and I, we talk about it a lot. It brings out something else in your playing. It basically you're coaxing composition out of the air.
Mm, yeah,
When you've been improvising for a long time, it's just what you do. So it sort of gives great strength to just that, this really core ability that improvisers have to just pull it out of the air, no
yeah,
matter what.
yeah, definitely, yeah,
So I
definitely,
think that's where it comes from.
yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, but
I have an experience. I don't know if you've had experiences like this, but I've worked with this composer, Sarah Weaver,
mhm,
and she's spearheading the most innovative work using Jack Trip software, very complex software that allows musicians to play in real time on the internet with one another
hmm,
with almost negligible delay.
oh, wow.
And I've done concerts with Sarah where we've played live with Korea, China, Dubai, Switzerland, California, Canada. And, I have to say, it's the most amazing experience. Um, you have a little bit of a visual readout of the other musicians who are sitting there in a completely different time zone, halfway around the world, and you're playing with them in real time.
Yeah,
To me, that's exciting.
yeah, that's crazy. I mean,
It is crazy, but it's very invigorating. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Like Pat Thomas, like a UK piano player.
Who's that?
Pat Thomas. he's not
Pat Thomas.
so well. I mean, he plays with Evan Parker a lot and like with many improvising musicians. And
Okay, I'm sorry,
he
I don't know.
and
Mhm.
we just did this talk the other day, and he said like with Evan they recorded a studio session, like studio work, not a concert, but like 4 New York musicians. It was like I think Craig Taborn and some Matt Mitchell and some other guys, and 4 guys in the UK, Evan Parker and Pat and some other people, and it was just amazing. He said no delays, nothing. You looked at each other on cameras, and it was a studio album they did, and it's just fascinating. I think that's
Well, you need good help from good audio engineers
yeah,
to
of
help
course,
make
of course.
everything seamless for you because they do a lot of the hard work to
Yeah,
make it happen so that you can do it.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
possible. You're right. It
That's
is so
crazy.
possible.
It's crazy. But one question: why the soprano for you? I mean, why the saxophone? When did this, and especially for jazz improvisation, like what was the trigger for you? I guess
I was
70s
I
or
was I was very young when I started. Hard to know. It was shiny.
that's a good answer.
At that time, at age 9, it was shiny. The reason the soprano, I have to credit my woodwind teacher, the guy who
Mm.
really taught me how to play. A great woodwind virtuoso by the name of Joe Viola.
Mhm. Oh yeah, okay, sure. No, no.
And Joe Viola, we used to have lessons, and he would always pull out his soprano, and he had the most extraordinary sound, the most
Mm.
extraordinary. I'd never heard anything like it. And I guess it was from being around him. I says, I want what he's doing. I want that. So that's where it began, to be honest. It was
Mm.
with him.
Well, and for jazz improvisation, who were the guys that got you excited? I mean, like,
For jazz improvisation, I was listening to every saxophone. I was listening to everybody I could listen to. I mean, it wasn't just,
yeah.
soprano, it was anything. Um, but when it comes to sound, it was Joe.
Mm.
Joe, it was about a
Interesting.
sound, having a sound, and that made a big impression on me when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I know of him. I mean, people told me who were his students, and but yeah, uh, that's so important that you have in this initial phase someone who like really provides you something
Yeah, I
special, I
was very, I
guess,
was very,
Yeah.
and I was exposed to this amazing virtuoso and this amazing sound at a very young age. So it definitely had an impact on me. Sure.
Mm. And you studied at Yale, right? And then at what
Hmm.
when did you move to New York? When was that?
1970, the fall of 1977, right
77.
after I graduated.
Okay.
77, 78, yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah,
How was that
I
like for
moved
you?
right from.
This initial coming there, like who were the first people you connected with and started
Well,
playing
some
with?
some some people that I knew from playing in New Haven. I was part of this really interesting group of musicians that happened to be in New Haven, Connecticut at the same time in the 1970s.
Mm,
If I went down the list of all those musicians, you couldn't believe how many of them we were all in one place,
mm,
creating a lot of creative music uh, together. And I got in touch with many of them when I first came to New York. Um, everything I can think of everyone from Anthony Davis,
oh yeah,
George Lewis.
yeah.
I don't know if Jerry Hemingway had moved into that time or
Well,
Mark
Ray
Dresser,
Anderson probably, right?
Ray Anderson. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
all those guys we knew from New Haven. Um, and of course, I think some of my very first performances in New York were with vocalist Jay Clayton.
Hmm,
That was one of my first gigs in New York City was with Jay Clayton.
really? Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Was it hard in the beginning when you came to New York? I mean, or how was the scene like in the late 70s? There was still like kind of the love
Yeah,
scene.
it was the loft. It was the
Yeah,
loft scene, exactly. And you're young, you got all the energy in the world, but was it scary? Yeah. Sure, it was hard. It takes a long time to get things going, and
yeah.
playing at whatever loft you could play at, or I can list places that, there are a lot of places I played that don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I remember my first gig was at a place called The Brook. I think it was on 16th Street or 17th Street in Chelsea. Anyway, again, a creative music space. I played duos,
Yeah. Wow.
But there were a lot of things like that, and you just had to hang in there. There was
You think it
it
in
was
a
scary.
sense it was easier or not really? Were there more places to play or like, I mean, now post-COVID it's different, of course, but like,
I think it's different. I think each generation they find their own homes.
yeah,
Uh, Back then there were places, but it was still difficult to get in and play. To get a gig, to get
mm,
it was it's never been easy. So
yeah,
um, I'm not quite sure how it compares.
yeah,
I
it's
have
hard,
to ask
sure,
some of my
yeah,
students. I think they have their own trials and tribulations.
yeah. I mean, now after COVID, I think it's like even harder. I think it's just this strange clubless world in a sense. Many venues
Huh.
closed,
Yeah,
so it's like,
how to play music no matter what, no
yeah,
matter what.
exactly, yeah, yeah,
It gives a lot of resonance to the meaning of why you play. Why do you
yeah.
play?
A lot of sacrifice, yeah, and time, yeah. Yeah, but you mentioned Jerry Hemingway, and I know Jerry that in the 70s already he founded his own label, and Tim Byrne did it, and but I also you also took this self-initiative and started your own label. How did that happen? And
Oh, you named all the right people. The one person you missed though was the mentor to all of us then in New Haven, and that was Leo Smith,
oh yeah,
Leo Wadada Smith.
sure, of course, yeah,
Leo we were part of creative music improvisation concerts that he would help spearhead, and Leo was championing making albums on his own label because that's what you had to do. If nobody was interested, you do it yourself.
yeah,
And it was from his example that we all learned. I didn't know anything about, making records, but I looked at them, I looked at Jerry, I looked at everybody. I said, okay, I'll learn, trial by fire. I'll try this and I'll learn by doing it. In fact, it was really Leo who inspired all of us, I think,
yeah, and
to be. And also, I give credit in those early days to the New Music Distribution Service, which you may recall was an organization run by Carla Bley
oh, okay,
for lots of creative musicians to channel their recordings and to give musicians a place to disseminate, to distribute to critics and radio. It was called the New Music Distribution Service, and it served a lot of people to help get a lot of people's music out to a broader audience.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, now it's so easy in a sense. Well, at least in the sense of putting it on Bandcamp, and sending it digital, to journalists, and back then it was like, packing
No,
and
it was a big deal. 12-inch by 12-inch LPs that had to be mailed,
yeah,
and critics who had to be serviced, and making an album of vinyl, LP was a time. It's a very laborious process. It takes a lot of manufacturing to do it and to do it well. So, those were that way of making albums was I think instructional. It was a way of teaching.
mm,
I think all the things that I learned doing that in those days helped me all the way through my career.
yeah,
How to be a producer, how to be a record producer, how to do it.
yeah. No, it's
Even when we had to splice tape,
yeah, shit, yeah. That's
razor
crazy.
blades.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Those are the old days.
But it was like the idea of the album was. That's why, nowadays I think the idea of the album it's almost lost because it's easier to make it. I think back then when I hear to you guys, it was like something special because it was not so easy to reach,
No, it's a good point. Making a document of your music was hard. you know. And so yes, it was a very special event that you put all your energy at. You tried to make everything the very best that you could. And interestingly enough, Samo, I talk with Mark Helias a lot about this, that even today when we're making digital albums, we still think like we're making LPs. We still have the same narrative sense of how cuts flow, an opening cut to, you know, like 20 minutes on a side. We still think like that, believe it or not, when we make, you know, even 50-minute albums or whatever, you know, we're still thinking side one, side two. And we're still thinking of the narrative
flow.
That's part of listening. You can't help it. That's where we come from.
Yeah.
So it's still with us. Even digitally, it's still with us.
No, that's important. I mean, you know, my generation still listens or listened to albums in a whole. You know, I still bought CDs with my lunch money to save up. And, you know, it was a special thing to read the booklet and, you know, wear out that CD. And like the younger generation now, it's like, 20 seconds of one tune. Yeah, okay, I'll skip shuffle. You know, it's
not a physical thing. Yeah, it's not a physical relationship. Yeah,
it's way different. Yeah, funny. But you know, I mentioned Mighty Lights before, and you know, you wrote some amazing music on that one. I mean, you've been such a prolific writer, I think, throughout your career since the late 70s, and I love those melodies on that one. I don't know, it's something Ornette-ish about it very much, and I you know, I love Ornette. But what's your process? I'll start first here, like when composing in general throughout your career. I guess it's related to a project you're doing, of course, but you know, do you sit down with a horn piano or?
Well, back then, I sit the piano, you know. Back then, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I mean, I was very inspired by Ornette, and who better to play those tunes with than the guys who were his primary rhythm section. That was like a dream come true.
How did you hook up those guys, actually? I mean, how did that connection happen with Charlie and Ed?
Thank Matthias Winkelmann at Enja Records.
Really?
He said to me, I had been touring. I got to know Enja Records. I got to know Matthias because I had been touring with David Friedman. Played with David Friedman for a few years, and so we got to know one another. And Matthias, to his credit, said to me, "What's your dream rhythm section? You want to make a record? What's your dream rhythm section?" And I didn't hold back. I said, Ed Blackwell and Charlie Haden. And then I think it was just about a year or so before that, I had just met Fred Hersch. You know, like I'd heard Fred playing down at Bradley's. And in my mind, I put them all together, and that's how Mighty Lights came to be. I got my dream rhythm section, and I never imagined that I would be playing with those guys.
How was it like in the studio when you guys met? I mean, how was the vibe?
It was fast. Oh no, Charlie and Ed, it was fast, man. It was fast. You know, you just play, and if I told you, I could tell you all kinds of stories about Charlie and Ed, but one of the most amazing qualities about Charlie Haden is that he has this quality, and Mark Helias shares this with him, I would say, is this amazing ability to make everybody that he plays with sound better. Or sound absolutely right. He has this uncanny ability to find notes that make anything that you play make you sound great. That's Charlie Haden.
True.
And when you put Charlie Haden with Ed Blackwell, if I were to try to describe to you what it feels like to play with that rhythm section playing time, I've never, to this day, never ever felt that same feeling. It's gone. You know, those guys are gone. But what it felt like is like you were surfing a wave. When those guys played time, it was like there was absolutely nothing you could do wrong. It was like they were taking you for the grandest ride you've ever been on. And Blackwell, I played a bit more with Ed in many contexts, not just with Charlie, but with like Fred Hopkins. Do you remember Fred?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Oh, really?
Great bass player. We played a number of gigs, and I got to know Ed in a number of contexts. And I guess my favorite story about, I have several wonderful stories about Ed, but one of my favorites was a memory of one of the first times I started playing with him and Charlie. And I had never felt such complexity coming at me from the drum set before.
Mm.
When you play with Blackwell, all of Africa is behind you.
Yeah, that's nicely
And
put. Yeah.
there's such complexity in the polyrhythms that are going on in his just natural time feel. I remember it scared me. I never heard. It was like, what's that? You know? And then it was like, yeah, that's this amazing, amazing feeling. And once you get to know it, it's like unlike any other. I mean, Ed was like the drummer's drummer. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something about his feel. I have memories of playing with him and Charlie and Fred Hersch at the Village Vanguard in like 1980 something, you know, early
Ooh.
1980.
Wow.
And I can remember some of the most wonderful. I probably have some cassette tapes somewhere of this. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I think I had a cassette, you know, like, you know, a little cassette recorder. I record something. I have some recordings of solos that Ed would play. A lot of times we were playing some of my music, and then we were playing, you know, some standard Ornette's, you know, repertoire that
Yeah.
Charlie liked, and we did a bunch of Ornette things. But when there was a drum solo, I can remember this one solo where Blackwell, he pulled up this nipple gong, you know, this Chinese gong, and for like 5 minutes, he just had his, you know, like the stick or the mallet, whatever it was. He just played like this amazing rhythm solo on this one gong for like, it went on for 5, and it was like people were going insane. It was so filled. Oh my God. It was like unlike anything you ever heard. And it was like, you know, I just thinking about it, the hairs on my arm are standing up just remembering what Blackwell used to do.
Yeah.
But those are some of my most wonderful memories of two of the most amazing musicians I think I've ever played with in my life.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
And I'm
Yeah.
honored to play with them. And
What?
so Mighty Lights was a doc.
Yeah, that's. I mean, being a band leader in that situation, what was that easy for you, or like, did it feel natural?
I was always writing my own music, so I playing the original music and showing those guys were very appreciative
Okay.
of the creativity and the individual voice. And let's face it, I remember Blackwell. He just it was interesting to him that this white woman was playing a saxophone, and much, you know, he liked it. You know, he liked it. As the story goes about him talking about Ornette. You know, the other musician says, "What are you doing playing with that guy?" He came, you know, and Blackwell just said, "I like it," and history proved him right. You know.
Yes, it did. Yeah. Yeah.
So those.
That's
Thank
beautiful.
you. I don't often get to tell those stories, but thank you. It makes me smile inside just to think of both of them.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to hear that. You know, it's like really, I really love that album. Like, I have it on CD. Like, I bought it like when I was, I guess, 16 or
You
something.
know, I still have the LPs.
Oh man.
You know, it was never an LP.
Wow. Yeah, it's
And that
beautiful.
recording of Lost in the Stars, Fred's playing on that. That's to this day, that's still one of my favorite ballad recordings.
Yeah, Fred is. I mean, what's that ballad
Lost in the Stars by Kurt Weill.
Yeah, no, but like on Mighty Lights, that's you wrote this beautiful ballad.
Oh, the piece for Bill Evans, yeah.
Man with Glasses,
Man with
right?
Glasses.
Yeah, man, that's so beautiful what he plays there. It's just.
Well, I'll have to send you the chart sometime.
Oh, please, I would love to see that. I would love to see that. But what's you and
Your
Fred?
address, send me.
How did you and Fred hook up, actually?
I think my memory is like in 1980 or something like that.
Awesome. All right.
I can remember going to Bradley's and hearing Fred playing duets with Charlie Hayden.
Oh, wow, man. It's great.
Yeah, and when I heard Fred, I says, just like I said, I like that. I like that. I want to play with him.
Yeah,
That's kind of the way it went.
yeah,
And
beautiful.
the rest was history. And he and I have a wonderful
Yeah, duos and everything.
long-term
Yeah,
collaboration.
yeah.
So that was the beginning of it, like 1980, 80 something, 80.
Wow, that's amazing. But you mentioned David Friedman. With him, you went to Europe for the first time?
Yeah.
And how was that like for you? Because there was still like East Germany, West Germany. We had like 6 zillion currencies
Oh God,
and
yeah.
borders.
I have memories of with the machine guns going going into Berlin, going from East Germany to West Germany. Yeah, I remember all of that. I think it was not my first time in Europe. My earliest trip to Europe was a State Department tour of Poland
Oh
in
wow, okay,
1974.
wow, that's heavy.
That was even scarier.
I can imagine. Yeah, yeah,
That was scarier. But yes, some of my earliest touring experiences were with Vibus David Friedman. Yeah,
yeah.
in Europe.
Was it like
Played
you
live.
imagined it would be? Like the first touring? When you're young, you imagine like,
I know. It was all new to me. I was just going into it because I just wanted to play. I just wanted to play, and that's what you did if you wanted to play. Those van tours. You get in a van and you drive endlessly.
yeah, yeah,
And that's what those tours were like then.
yeah. But you spoke about Ed and Charlie, and you also played with one of my favorite musicians of all time, like Kenny Wheeler, and he's I think top three of my favorites. And how was
Mine
that
too.
experience like for you? I mean,
Oh, it was like again. I felt the same way about Kenny that you did. I
mm,
never heard a sound like that, and I think the album that sent me over the moon was this album that he made called Gnu High.
yeah, sure.
With Keith Jarrett, Dave Holland. When I heard this sound, I says, I've got to play with this guy. So I can't remember how I found Kenny. It was a phone call or something to England.
Yeah,
And I had the opportunity to do some playing and to record. And he was, I sent him some of my music, and he was interested. It was just, I reached out, and he was interested. And boy, the rest is history, because I never played with anybody like that, and I probably never will again. With someone who plays trumpet like that.
Did you do gigs also with Kenny then?
Oh yeah, we played festivals, and
Oh, really?
yeah, I brought him over. We played Sweet Rhythm. Remember Sweet Basils? We
With
went
Basil,
up,
yeah, sure.
played that. We played at the Kennedy Center. We played a few places. Played up in Canada a few times, and we recorded some beautiful albums together. Played some really. I could write the most amazing music for Kenny. I was just like, wow.
Yeah. Do you always write for people you're gonna play with? Like, or do you write in general? Like you have like sketchbooks or
Well,
what's
both, but
yeah,
I knew the kind of thing that I wanted to do with Kenny. Those kind of melodic lines that
yeah,
reach into the stratosphere and back, and have a kind of different kind of motion and flow. That's what I hear in his playing.
yeah,
And Kenny had this ability. I can remember again standing next to him and feeling it of going from the highest note of intensity to the subtlest
mhm,
sound in a split second. He,
yeah,
he could turn on a dime like a Ferrari, and I'll never forget that quality. And so I found something in that led to the writing the way I did for the kind of line writing that I wrote with him.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
trying to find that in him. So
yeah.
yeah. Oh, it's
My-
so great to talk about these people. It's sad they're all gone, but
yeah, well, the music is there. That's I always put on a record. Like, I'm such a huge fan of Kenny and like John Abercrombie and all these amazing musicians, and then I just put on an
wow.
album. I'm like, man,
I have a memory of playing Wigmore Hall in London with Kenny and John.
seriously?
And
Oh shit.
Yeah. And Rufus Reed came over. It was the four of us. It was like, no. It wasn't John Abercrombie. It was John Taylor, the piano player.
Yeah, even better almost. No, but I'm kidding, but amazing. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, we had a great time. A beautiful hall too. Yeah.
So it was a
Anyway,
gig, John Taylor and Kenny. So basically Azimuth kind of.
yeah, a little piece of azimuth, right? It
Wow.
was my gig, but I brought over Rufus, and we played some wonderful music together, and beautiful acoustic space. I remember that.
Mm. But with Abercrombie, you also played?
Nobody.
I mean,
No, I'm sorry.
no.
I was incorrect about that, but I do remember, intersecting with John in a few other occasions. I'm trying to remember what they were.
Mm.
I can't recall, but
He would have been like this, almost like natural that you would play with him.
talking about all my favorite people, Kenny Wheeler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. But
Yeah.
when going through your musical career and projects, you've done so much different stuff, going also interdisciplinary. And I studied American poetry, and I was really interested that you did the Emily Dickinson project. Like, how did you how did you actually start that one? How did you reimagine it? Like, what was the process there? How do you get inspired to write music after?
Well, I went to a lecture at the New York Public Library
Mm.
that a radical historian of Emily Dickinson gave. He was a music historian named George Boswick.
Mm.
And he brought forth this really innovative idea about Emily Dickinson, reminding people that she was a musician before she was a poet. She played piano. Did you know
Oh,
that?
really? I didn't know that. Wow.
And and if you read historically about her, he was a musicologist. It turns out that she used to, in the middle of the night, she used to go upstairs, and her father said, "Make things up on the piano."
Wow.
She was an improviser. So it wasn't lost on me that there was something in the way she used words that reminds me of the way jazz musicians use notes. I don't know what it was, but when I heard that, that's when I began thinking about this other way of trying to express an interest across the centuries
Yeah.
with her poetry and mind, to have it expressed through improvisation. It's a different way of thinking about poetry than the more traditional
Yeah.
setting of musical poems, or like tone poems. That wasn't what I was interested in at all. I found that it was sometimes as strong as a phrase or a gorgeous nothing or a
Beautiful.
stanza that would trigger some idea in me musically.
Yeah.
And that's the way the crosstalk between the poetry and the music happened. It was much more abstract.
Yeah. What Steve Swallow did years ago with Robert Creeley, that this completely different type of reinterpreting or reimagining poetry, in a sense that it's not just like this bullshitty, always boring. Like, I like that different approaches. But yeah,
It's also great. It's also great to work with an actor, because when they speak those words, it's like taking the music off the page.
Yeah.
A great actor can make words resonate in ways that it boggles the mind, I think.
Yeah. Did you also like kind of do that with art, like with the visual art?
Did I do that with the visual art?
I mean,
with
like
Jack
kind of.
Pollock.
Oh yeah, you did it, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm the kind of person, I'm interested in ideas, and when I was young, I've always been interested in a lot of things, whether it's abstract painting or inter space, going into space, outer space, or whether it's you know, neuroscience or
Mm.
whatever it is. I've always been interested in a lot of things. When I was younger, all those interests existed separately. It wasn't until a more mature time in my development as an artist that I started to understand that these things could
Yeah.
intersect with my music and impact on one another in interesting ways. And so I found that a lot of my music has been inspired by topics outside of just music. It's because I like to think about different things. And then at a certain point, I let them talk to each other
Yeah.
in ways that I never imagined when I was interested in all these things. So that's how it came about. And that's how so many of the albums have this kind of thematic interest behind them. It's just, it's me. I like thinking about different things, you
Yeah.
know.
Do you still do that to push yourself like that? You know, compositionally and like, I mean,
And
what would
I
say?
I never know what my next thing I'm going to get interested in is. The last thing I started digging deep into was photography.
Really?
I discovered this wonderful, legendary New York City photographer named Berenice Abbott,
Hmm.
and this science photography that she did in the 1960s. It was like blew my mind. You know, like demonstrating principles of physics. It was before anybody had ever done that before. She was the first one. Anyway.
Hmm.
Anyway, so again, that photography, like, oh, that sparked the picturing the invisible music, you know. So you never know. You never know where a good idea is going to come from. I guess that's put it on my T-shirt. You never know where a good idea is going to come from.
Yeah, that's the bestseller, right?
So that's kind of it.
Yeah, no, it's important, I think, you know, to push yourself conceptually and compositionally. I think to get ideas. I think sometimes I get stuck like when writing, and then you know, you start reading poetry or you see a good movie, or you know, it doesn't have to be with music actually, which I think the best guys do it like that, right? I mean, you do it, so I
The
like
other
that.
thing
Yeah.
I recall too is, you know, when I would, you know, I'm very lucky that I met a lot of great musicians who are the primary originators of improvised music and got the chance to hang out with some of them.
Hmm.
And I realized that many of these people, Charlie Haden was one of them for sure, were always interested in topics outside of music. They're always
Yeah.
reading, always fascinated with all kinds of things. And if you get around people like that, uh, it's sort of it rubs off. You know, you realize, oh, these people are interested in ideas,
Yeah.
not just music. They're interested in ideas, wherever they come from.
Yeah.
So I noticed that about a lot of some of the great improvisers. You know, whether it's talking to Sonny Rollins or whether it's talking to Charlie or something, they always were interested in things
Hmm.
uh, or reading something interesting. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the last time I met Mark Elias. He was in Slovenia. I forgot who he played with, but we hung out until like 3 a.m. in the morning, and you know, talking about everything except music. I think it was just like, you know,
Absolutely,
and I
absolutely.
love that. It's just like, you know, that people are so wide in their knowledge and interests, and you know, sometimes in Slovenia it's so hard to find this. I think it's just like, and you know, when I speak to people like you or Mark, or it's just like, man, you know, other things, not only about, you know, 251 or something. I don't know. It's,
Yeah, no, interested. Absolutely.
I like that. But I wanted to ask you, you know, what's you have a new album out, and you said you haven't played any gigs actually after the COVID. And is there something in the planning? Are you planning to come maybe to Europe also, or what is on the schedule for this year? I mean,
You know, it's hopefully things are going to get better. So at the moment, um, I have lots of things I would like to do, but I haven't made the plans yet.
mm.
And one of them is actually reconnecting with an old collaborator of mine, which is David Friedman, who's over there in Berlin.
Oh
And
yeah, shit, exactly, yeah, yeah,
I've much of the music that I wrote for this Picturing the Invisible project. The reason it was called Focus One was because the pandemic happened, and I had written music that involved much more extensive ensemble,
yeah,
and we couldn't do it. So I had to figure out how to do things that would be duet workable, you know.
Yeah.
But much of the music that I wrote has vibes and David Friedman in mind. And
Okay.
I've got to get that captured eventually. Eventually, we're going to get to that. So, and
That's
there's
beautiful.
so much music to make. I hesitate um, to tell you all the things that are on my mind, but I'm waiting and waiting and ready. It's just it's for me. I have to be a little extra cautious, and things are getting better, but soon it's going to be soon.
Mm. Yeah, I hope you will make it to Europe. Would be nice to see you with a trio or something.
Oh, it's been a
Play
long
some
time,
concerts.
long time.
When was the last time you were in Europe, actually?
Well, it was just before the pandemic.
Okay.
I can remember I was it wasn't a performance. I was actually playing at an audio conference because I was working with the engineers that I work with, Jim Anderson and Ulrika Schwartz,
Mm.
talking about our immersive recording work together at this high-end audio
Interesting. Okay.
conference that happened in Munich. Where was it? Yeah, it was in Munich. Yeah. Anyway, that was the last time I was there. It was before the pandemic. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice
Uh,
to bring you here. I hope you'll make it.
all in the future. I had several gigs all planned, that I had to cancel.
Yeah, sure.
I was going to play with the radio orchestra and all kinds of things but unfortunately that couldn't happen. But it
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, it will. Yeah.
It
Cool.
will.
Great. Jane, I'll leave you a nice, what is today? Even Monday. I'm totally out of time. I can days these days. Like, but thanks for sharing some of these thoughts and really appreciate it,
Thanks for asking me about some things I don't often get to talk about, which I really appreciate. It makes me smile thinking about
Yeah,
all these great musicians.
me too.
And
I mean, when you talked about those guys, I'm just like, man, that's so beautiful,
I do miss them. I really do. And just talking about them just makes me smile
Mm,
because I can remember their music that way.
yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you
Thank you
for asking.
too. If you're new.